This brings us on to another important dynamic in this regard, which is this institution known as Africom. And Africom is the U.S. African High Command, the U.S. Africa Command, with partners, counters transnational threats and malign actors, strengthen security forces in response to crises in order to advance European national interests and promote regional security, stability, and prosperity. I've got that explanation of the U.S. Africa High Command from the Africom website itself. Africom is the military high command that operates in Africa on behalf of the United States of America. That's basically what that's explaining. The current head commander of Africom is one General Michael Langley, who has been the head of Africom since 2022. Generally speaking, heads of these military high commands serve 2 to 3 year terms. And so his term is supposed to be coming to an end shortly. But as of now, he is still the head of Africom, the commander of Africom. He recently spoke, brothers and sisters. Every now and then, as I'm sure you're aware, there are these military hearings between the Senate, and Joint Chiefs of Staff and so on and so forth, right? And I'm going to play you 2 videos from 2 of these. The first one is from 2023, whereby he's being asked about the role that Africom plays on the African continent, and this is important because ever since hearing all of this about America complaining that Europe is not footing the bill, and now Europe vowing to rearm itself and up its military organization and cooperation, I have been speculating as to where this is going to go. And my speculation is that Europe and its military cooperation is going to up its military presence on the African continent. Especially because, in relation to the French military in particular, many African nations have been wary of the presence of European armies. Especially because there are some African nations who are instituting the withdrawal and running the American military bases and personnel out of their nations like Chad and Niger. That this reorganization is going to be directed against the African continent, but that Europe will be the first port of call. The ones with the troops on the ground, especially in relation to nations who they say are not meeting the interest of the Western world, Europe and America, Britain in particular. So listen to this line of questioning that took place at this hearing a few years ago.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates, for 5 minutes.
General Langley, I have constituents that have been scattered across Africa on train and equip missions. So just ballpark, in the last decade, how many Africans has the United States military trained and equipped?
Congressman, I don't have that figure. I can get that figure for you.
Ballpark, just, how many?
Congressman, it would be a wild guess right now.
Seems like something we should know, right?
Over the years, we have trained a substantial number, especially in the Gulf of Guinea states, but including
more than 10,000.
It is more than 10,000.
More than 50,000.
I'd say we're reaching around 50,000
okay.
at least.
And what percentage of the people we've trained end up participating in insurrections or coups against their own government?
Very small number, Congressman. Very small number.
So what percentage do you think?
I'd say probably less than 1%.
But it does happen.
The IMET program is in force, and we've pushed a significant number through our schools across the.
Yeah, and what data sets do you track to arrive at the conclusion that less than 1% of the roughly 50,000 that we've trained have participated in coups? Because it'd be like about 500, about 1% of 50,000.
Congressman, you may have that information. I don't at this time, but I know.
Well, I know there are some, right? Like go ahead and throw up that image. This is Colonel Medai Doumbouya, and this is a photo of him. Did we train and equip him in Guinea?
By name, I cannot identify that.
Well, that guy in the middle with the big red hat, Colonel Medai Doumbouya, that's him with a bunch of U.S. service members outside of our embassy. And just months after this photo was taken in 2021, he led a coup in Guinea and threw out the leader. Does that concern you?
Congressman, core values is what we start off with in IMA programs.
Do we share core values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Core values. I will repeat that. Core values. Respect for humanity.
Do we share those values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Absolutely. In our curriculum.
He led a coup.
We do.
Okay, well, that's a very telling answer. In Burkina Faso, did we share core values with the leader that we trained there who led a coup?
It's in our curriculum. We stress core values. We request civilian-led governance.
Wait, hold on. Is leading coups in our curriculum?
Absolutely not.
So
civilian-led.
My question is, do we share core values with the coup leader in Burkina Faso who we trained?
Holistically, we teach core values with a respect for civilian governance, apolitical, and that's what sticks across a very high percentage in the 99 percentile.
Right? But not everybody. And
so, brothers and sisters, you see that the answer there was very evasive, right? He didn't really want to engage in too much answering of that question. And by the way, the coup leader who he's referring to there in Burkina Faso is the one who we know today as Ibrahim Traore. Okay, so I'm highlighting that Michael Langley at that time was kind of evasive about the question. Now, it's true, it's a fact that Traore was in fact trained by U.S. forces in Burkina Faso. But let's go forward to a couple weeks ago. On the 3rd of April, Michael Langley again answering questions. Let's hear what he has to say.
The approach that we have had with USAID and the other things like the President's Initiative on AIDS, how does our U.S. approach compare and contrast to the approach of Russia in Africa and also Communist China in Africa?
Oh, Chairman, we've always had the lead. So what you're seeing in those two competitors or challengers, they're following in our wake. They see what works as far as our influence and deepening partnerships through those soft powers, whether it be health diplomacy or whether it be in development type programs. So they're following in our wake, trying to replicate what we do best. And I think the African countries know this. This is where, as we start to look at going forward, as State Department starts to reset these programs, looking at what worked and what didn't work and doubling down on what does work, I think we have enough capital built up in these countries for them to ensure their stabilization and also prosperity. The other two competitors are just trying to replicate what we do best.
I can imagine a situation, though, in which the ruling elite of a country is receiving gratuities on the side that in order to the benefit of the strongman leader and not to the populace of the country. Does that sort of corruption and bribery go on with regard to the Belt and Road?
Absolutely, Chairman. You know, I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traore and Burkina Faso, you know, as they know that both, you know, whether it's the their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime. There's a number of examples across. Even in Sudan, what's going on with the rapid support forces and Burhan of the Sudan forces, when you get down to it, is all about the revenue that can be drawn out of that. And there are nefarious actors in the CCP or in sometimes Russia are complicit in those activities.
Okay, well, you can't imagine how frustrating it seems to me that this mineral-rich continent has not been able to move to a utilization of the resources to benefit the people there. After all this time, it's a puzzle that we haven't unwound.
It's such a puzzle. But it's a puzzle that why hasn't Africa been able to utilize this? Or it's such a puzzle why Africa hasn't been able. The hypocrisy and this conversation, right? It's 2 hours long, over 2 hours long, and you can't help but watch it and think of the high levels of absolute psychopathic mentality that is involved in a conversation such as this. There are so many things I could highlight. One of them is the fact that the General Michael Langley is identifying the fact that Russia and China, according to him, are attempting to just do what America's been doing. Yeah, but what I'm highlighting here really specifically is the fact that whereas 2 years ago, 2023, when the coup just happened in Burkina Faso, Langley was not too willing to engage in too much questioning about Ibrahim Traore. Today, he was most willing to answer that question and assert that Ibrahim Traore and his government is basically working with the Chinese, and that working relationship is benefiting Traore in relation to the gold trade at the expense of the people. This is his charge now, right? This is the charge of Michael Langley. So the question then becomes, what has happened between 2023 and 2025 that makes Langley so willing to speak now when he wasn't able to speak before? Just to provide some context for this conversation, in the introduction to the conversation, these words,
the approach that
were uttered to set the tone for what was going to be discussed.
In Africa, our adversaries have focused on building trade relationships while seizing influence from us. China's military ambitions on the continent are no secret, from their growing presence in Djibouti to the more than 100 seaports that have been constructed, financed, or operated by Chinese state-owned enterprises and could be used as dual use for future military contingencies. Russia has expanded its military engagement in Africa also, including by restructuring the Wagner Group's operations under an umbrella organization called Africom, an historic irony of great proportions. They want to expand the reach of the Russian private military enterprise across the entire continent. Russia is also investing heavily in disinformation campaigns across the continent to spread anti-Western movements, undermine democracy, and promote Russian-backed authoritarian leaders, especially in regions like West Africa. It would seem that America's competitors recognize that to neglect Africa is to invite long-term strategic peril.
It seems that Russia and China realize that to neglect Africa is to invite long-term strategic peril. This whole conversation is based upon America trying to shore up its power on the African continent in relation to what they perceive to be threats from Russia and China. The agency of African people in this conversation is nowhere to be found. The agents of this conversation as it is being discussed here are the United States, Europe, Russia, and China. The agency of African people is to be found nowhere in this conversation. So the question then becomes, where and how do we assert our agency as a people, brothers and sisters?